So imagine you walk into a clinic, right? And the nurses there can accurately predict whether or not you have a terminal neurological disease, like ALS, just by observing how nice you are.
Oh, wow, just by being nice.
Literally just by how nice you are. Like if you are incredibly accommodating, you're constantly apologizing, always putting everyone else's comfort first, they actually mark you as high risk.
That sounds completely absurd.
It does.
Yeah.
But this was a very real documented phenomenon at the Cleveland Clinic. And, it points to a much larger and, frankly, terrifying reality about how we live today.
Right, because it forces us to ask this really deeply uncomfortable question. We spend billions on wellness and genetic testing and, green juice.
Oh, yeah, the whole wellness industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yet chronic illness, autoimmune conditions,
Yeah.
mental health struggles, they are all skyrocketing. So on paper, we should be the healthiest society in human history, but in reality, our collective health is just collapsing.
And that contradiction, that is the mission of today's deep dive. We're unpacking the groundbreaking concepts spearheaded by physician Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yeah, specifically looking at his work in the book, The Myth of Normal.
Right. We are exploring a pretty radical premise here. What if your chronic physical or mental illness isn't just some mysterious glitch in your biology or random bad luck?
What if it's an entirely expected, normal adaptation to a toxic culture? A culture that basically forces you to suppress who you actually are.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because this is huge.
It is. And to grasp the scale of what we're talking about, I think it helps to look at that famous parable by the writer David Foster Wallace.
Well, the fish one.
Yeah, the fish. So two young fish are swimming along, and an older fish swims past them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit until one finally looks at the other and asks, what the hell is water?
Right, because the most dangerous realities are the ones that are so omnipresent we don't even register them anymore.
Exactly. The water you and I are swimming in is our societal normal. It's the underlying hum of everyday stressors, the childhood conditioning, the cultural expectations that we just accept as how life is.
Part of the background noise.
Right. But when you look closely at the biology, this invisible water is actively dictating the physical structure of our brains and bodies.
But wait, to understand the mechanism behind that, like how culture literally makes us sick, we have to redefine a word that has become, honestly, incredibly diluted in our modern vocabulary.
You're talking about trauma.
Yes, trauma. I'll be honest, it feels like trauma has just devolved into a catch-all buzzword for anything mildly stressful, like someone gets a flat tire or they watch a sad movie and they call it trauma.
Yeah, we have fundamentally misunderstood that word because if you look at its origin, trauma actually comes from the Greek word for wound.
Wound. Okay.
Trauma is not the bad thing that happens to you. It's the injury that happens inside you as a result of that event. So if you get into a car crash...
The collision is the event.
Exactly. But the concussion you suffer, that is the trauma. It's the internal wound that outlasts the actual event.
So a wound basically either stays raw, meaning, you get triggered and hurt by the slightest touch, or it hardens into scar tissue.
Right, which protects you, sure, but it ultimately restricts your flexibility and kind of leaves you numb.
And we really have to categorize how these wounds happen, right? Like, we're all familiar with capital T trauma.
Yeah, the catastrophic events, abuse, extreme poverty, war, violence, things that just should never happen to any vulnerable person, but tragically they do.
But it was the other category from the sources that really reframed things for me, small to trauma.
Oh, yeah. This is crucial.
Because this doesn't require overt abuse at all. It can be something as subtle as, say, a highly sensitive child failing to receive the emotional attunement they desperately need from a completely well-meaning parent.
Yeah. It's a profound, quiet disconnection. The psychologist D.W. Winnicott described it so brilliantly. He called it nothing happening when something might profitably have happened.
Nothing happening. Wow. Which perfectly explains this very vulnerable, frankly, almost embarrassing story Dr. Mate shares about himself in the text.
The airport story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's 71 years old, a highly respected physician, and he's flying back to Vancouver. He lands, he's feeling great, checks his phone, and he sees a message from his wife saying she hasn't left home yet to pick him up.
Which is, a minor inconvenience. Most people would just grab a coffee and wait.
Right. But instead, this 71-year-old expert on mental health completely shuts down. He gives her a really terse reply, takes a cab home, and then subjects her to the silent treatment for 24 hours.
24 hours. over delayed ride.
Over a delayed ride. He's just simmering with this intense childish rage, barely making eye contact, jaw clenched. It really begs the question, how does an adult brain get hijacked so completely by something so trivial?
Well, we're looking at a classic example of what the psychologist John Bowlby called detachment.
Detachment, okay.
So, when Dr. Mate was just 14 months old, he was living in Nazi-occupied Budapest. And his mother was forced to hand him over to a complete stranger in the street just to keep him alive. She just couldn't care for him in the ghetto.
Oh my God.
Right. And when they were finally reunited weeks later, he wouldn't even look at her for days.
Because his infant nervous system basically calculated the math of survival, right?
Mhm.
Like, I was so agonizingly hurt when you abandoned me, I simply cannot risk opening up to you again.
Exactly. It was a completely necessary infantile defense mechanism. So the trauma wasn't just the war itself, it was the biological disconnection from his own emotions that his brain encoded to survive the pain of perceived abandonment.
And so, fast forward 70 years.
Right. His wife is late. And in a fraction of a second, his nervous system interprets that minor delay through the lens of that original terrifying abandonment.
So the rational adult brain is just completely bypassed.
Totally offline. And the old scar tissue dictates his behavior. The past reaches out and overrides the present.
Okay, but here is the major leap we have to make for this deep dive. Because if trauma is essentially an internal disconnection from our own feelings, how does that severed connection leap from our psychology into our physical biology?
Like, how does an emotional shutdown manifest as a physical disease?
Exactly. Because medical science often treats the mind and body like a driver in a car,
Yeah.
right? Like the driver sits inside, turns the wheel, maybe kicks the tires, but they are completely separate entities.
Which is the traditional medical model. They send you to a psychiatrist for the mind and an oncologist for the body.
Right. But looking at the actual cellular biology in the sources, it's much more like a smartphone. The software, which is your mind, and the hardware, your body, are so flawlessly integrated that a glitch in the software will literally physically overheat the battery.
Yes. The neuroscientist Candace Pert actually coined a new term for this. She called it the body mind.
Spelled as one word, right?
Exactly, spelled as one single word to emphasize that unity. And the field that studies this is psychoneuroimmunology. It essentially maps the undeniable, literal biological pathways between your thoughts, your nervous system, your immune system, and your hormones.
And the translation hub for all of this is the HPA axis, right? The hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands.
Yeah, that system acts as a biological superhighway. So when you suppress an emotion, let's say you swallow your anger just to keep the peace, your HPA axis doesn't just ignore it.
It registers it.
It interprets that suppression as a state of chronic threat. And in response, it floods your bloodstream with stress hormones, primarily cortisol.
Which loops us right back to that unbelievable story from the Cleveland Clinic at the top of the show, the type C personality.
Yes, the pathological niceness.
Right, because we all know type A, the high-strung, stressed-out executive who pushes too hard and gets a heart attack. But type C is characterized by this compulsive people-pleasing. The person who refuses to ask for help constantly sacrifices their own needs and, above all, never, ever expresses anger.
And the crazy thing is, in our culture, we reward that behavior. We call that person a saint. We say, oh, they're so easy to be around.
Right.
But biologically, it is a trauma response. It's an adaptation a child makes to survive an environment where their natural, messy emotions just weren't acceptable.
Okay, but I really need to map this out physiologically. Why does being too nice actually cause physical destruction in the body?
Well, let's follow the cortisol. When you constantly suppress your own needs to manage other people's comfort, your nervous system is trapped in a permanent state of internal conflict.
Because you're fighting yourself.
Exactly. So your HPA axis responds by keeping your cortisol levels chronically elevated. And elevated cortisol aggressively suppresses the immune system. Specifically, it diminishes the effectiveness of your natural killer cells, or NK cells.
And NK cells are essentially the frontline assassins of the immune system, right? Their primary job is to hunt down and destroy malignant cancer cells and foreign invaders.
Right. So by smiling and saying, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it, when you are actually furious or exhausted, you are chemically tranquilizing your immune system's most important defense mechanism.
Wow. Which gives profound context to the story of a woman named Caroline from the book.
Oh, Caroline's story is incredible.
It really is. So she was diagnosed with severe breast cancer that had eventually spread to her bones. And her doctors gave her 12 to 24 months to live. Her children were just 8 and 9 at the time.
And she had been a classic type C her whole life, right?
Completely. For her entire life, she was the ultimate pleaser, rescuing everyone, avoiding conflict, always putting herself last. But facing death, the dam finally broke. She just dropped the persona.
She went into the doctor's office, right?
Yeah, she told her oncologist, with a level of profanity she had never used in her life, to basically take his statistics and shove them, because she needed 10 years to raise her boys.
And she outlived that terminal prognosis by over 2 decades. She raised both of her sons.
Because when Caroline finally tapped into that authentic, fierce, protective anger, when she stopped abandoning herself to please everyone else, she radically altered the hormonal and immunological environment of her own body-mind.
It's just staggering. Her internal emotional state actually altered her own cellular biology.
Okay, so if chronic stress shuts down our own immune system, does that mean our social interactions, like, say, a really bad fight with a spouse, are literally changing our white blood cell count in real time? Like, can we actually catch someone else's stress?
We absolutely can. And this brings us to a really fascinating area of research called interpersonal biology, which was pioneered by Dr. Dan Siegel. See, we're taught to view the human body as this sealed biological container, but physiologically, we are incredibly porous.
Okay, but what is the actual mechanism there? If my partner is stressed out about work, how does that physically enter my bloodstream?
We have intricate neural architecture designed specifically for this, most notably mirror neurons, combined with the co-regulation of our autonomic nervous system.
Okay, walk me through that.
So if you walk into a room and your spouse is just radiating anxiety, your mirror neurons detect their microexpressions and their posture. Your nervous system intercepts those signals. Your heart rate variability begins to match theirs, and your own HPA axis starts pumping out cortisol.
So we literally co-regulate each other's biology,
Exactly.
which perfectly explains why single people have a significantly higher risk of heart disease, right? But then, on the flip side, perfectly healthy married couples, during a hostile conflict, see their stress hormones rise and their immune functioning drop simultaneously. We are literally rattling each other's cells.
Yeah, and to see how deeply that social environment gets under our skin, we really have to look at epigenetics.
Right. Because for decades, we were sold the myth that our DNA is our fixed destiny.
Yeah, the Human Genome Project kind of pushed that idea.
I think we still largely believe it, honestly. We think genes are a blueprint, and if you have the gene for something, you're just waiting for the clock to run out.
But a much more accurate analogy is a grand piano. Your genes are the keys on the keyboard. They represent the potential notes that can be played. But your environment, your relationships, your diet, your neighborhood, your trauma, that is the pianist playing the song.
Wow.
Yeah, epigenetics is the science of how your environment attaches chemical tags to your DNA, turning certain genes on or muting them without ever actually changing the underlying genetic code.
And there's that incredible study by Dr. Moshe Seif at McGill University that proves this happens immediately.
The rat study.
Yes. So he studied mother rats and how they interacted with their pups in the first days of life. Specifically, he tracked how much the mothers licked and groomed their babies, which is, their version of mammalian nurturing.
Right. And he discovered that the pups who received high levels of nurturing had literal epigenetic changes in their brains.
The environment changed the brain structure.
Exactly. The nurturing environment unlocked specific genetic markers that built better receptors for stress hormones. So those pups grew up to be calm, resilient adults.
And the pups, who were ignored, those specific genes just stayed locked. They grew up anxious, jumpy, and totally overreactive to stress. Their early social environment wrote the permanent software for their nervous system.
And the scary part is, this environmental programming doesn't stop in childhood. It accelerates our very aging process through these structures called telomeres.
Right, telomeres. I always hear them described as the little plastic caps on the ends of your shoelaces, protecting your chromosomes from fraying. But that feels a bit, static to me.
Yeah, let's use a more dynamic metaphor. Think of a telomere like the fuse on a stick of dynamite. Every time your cells divide, that fuse burns just a little bit shorter. And when the fuse runs out, the cell stops functioning and you experience biological aging.
Okay, so what pours gasoline on that burning fuse?
Chronic stress. Nobel laureate Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn has actually shown that systemic societal issues like the chronic stress of poverty, living in a deprived neighborhood, or facing systemic racism literally grind down your telomeres faster.
So when you look at the physiological impact of those issues, it completely reframes how we view public health, doesn't it? Like, racism and poverty aren't just sociological theories or political talking points.
No, they are measurable physiological toxins. We can look into a person's cells and actually see the accelerated biological aging caused by the zip code they live in or the discrimination they endure.
That is just, it's heavy. So when you stack all of this up, the hidden emotional trauma, the culturally enforced niceness, the toxic environmental stress burning down our biological fuses, what happens when the system finally breaks?
Well, the body goes into open rebellion against itself. This is the landscape of autoimmune disease.
And the rates of autoimmune conditions like multiple sclerosis, Crohn's, lupus, scleroderma, they are just skyrocketing across the developed world right now.
Yeah, and there is a really glaring statistic here. Women make up 70 to 80% of all autoimmune sufferers.
70 to 80%. And human genetics simply do not mutate fast enough to explain a sudden massive spike like this over just a few decades.
Exactly. The explanation has to be environmental. And by environmental, we mean the total biopsychosocial environment. It's the crushing external pressures combined with that internal mandate we talked about to suppress your reaction to them.
This makes me think of that harrowing story of a young woman named Mioke from the text. In her 20s, she developed scleroderma, which is this terrifying condition where the body's connective tissues rapidly harden.
Yeah, she actually described it as her body undergoing self-mummification.
Self-mummification. Her hands curled into permanent claws. She was in agonizing pain, and conventional medicine totally gave up on her. She was actually preparing for medically assisted suicide.
Yet she's alive today, completely off medication. She's hiking, she's traveling.
But that miraculous recovery only happened after she did the brutal work of uncovering heavily repressed childhood trauma.
Right, she had been abandoned in a Korean orphanage, adopted, and then severely abused.
And all of that terror and rage had been buried under this hyper-functioning, successful persona. When her body couldn't hold the dam back anymore, it attacked itself. Healing the emotional wound literally reversed the physical one.
And Mioke's story demands that we completely alter our perspectives on what a disease actually is. The writer Eve Ensler, who now goes by V, survived stage 4 uterine cancer following a childhood of horrific abuse. And V realized that our culture views disease as a static thing.
Yeah, we use military language for it all the time. The war on cancer. We treat disease like an invading army that snuck into the castle, and we just have to bomb it with chemicals until it surrenders.
But what if disease isn't an invader? What if it is a dynamic process? The British physician David Smithers pointed out that cancer isn't a disease of cells any more than a traffic jam is a disease of cars.
That is such a brilliant analogy. You can study the internal combustion engine of a Toyota all day long, looking at the spark plugs and the pistons, but it will never tell you why there is a massive traffic jam on the highway.
Right. The traffic jam is a failure of the relationship between the cars and their environment. And disease is exactly the same. It's a failure of the relationship between the organism and its total environment. It's the culmination of decades of suppressed stress, genetic predispositions, and toxic social conditions.
Okay, but that raises a massive question. If swallowing our anger, ignoring our boundaries, and pleasing others literally drives our immune system to mutiny, why is it our default setting? Why do we universally do this to ourselves?
To answer that, we really have to look at the core tension in human development. Evolution equipped us with two conflicting survival drives. The first is attachment.
Which totally makes sense. I mean, human babies are born incredibly premature compared to, like, a horse or a cow. We are completely helpless for years. We absolutely must maintain a connection to our caregivers or we will die.
Right. Our brains are hardwired to secure that attachment at all costs. But the friction happens with our second survival drive, because we are also biologically wired for authenticity.
Okay, I have to pause you there, because authenticity sounds incredibly modern. It sounds like an Instagram self-help hashtag, live your truth, not a hard biological survival drive.
Oh, it has definitely been co-opted by wellness culture. But biologically speaking, authenticity is the imperative to know what you are feeling in your gut and to act on it.
Like an instinct.
Exactly. If our ancestors on the savannah felt a gut instinct of fear but ignored it because they wanted to look brave for the group, they were eaten by a lion. Authenticity is accurately interpreting your internal signals to navigate external danger.
So if we need both to survive, what happens in a modern childhood? Imagine a kid who is naturally boisterous or who gets fiercely angry when a sibling steals a toy. That anger is their authenticity. But their parents are stressed, maybe overworked, and they just can't handle that anger right then. So they withdraw their affection, or they send the kid to their room, or they get punishing.
Suddenly, the child's authenticity is directly threatening their attachment.
It's a cage match in the child's brain. Attachment versus authenticity.
Yeah.
Who wins?
Attachment wins every single time. It is a biological mandate. The child's nervous system calculates, okay, if I express my true feelings, I lose my parents' love. Losing their love equals death. Therefore, I will suppress my true feelings. The child amputates a vital part of themselves to secure the relationship.
It's like cutting off your own arm to save the rest of the body. It's a necessary amputation at the time.
Yeah.
And that childhood coping mechanism, that tragic choice, grows up into the adult type C personality.
Yeah.
We become chronic people pleasers. We never say no. We never get angry. We absorb everyone else's stress just to keep our attachments secure. And we are totally unaware that by being so universally nice, we are generating the chronic stress that is poisoning our own body-mind.
We carry the survival tactics of infancy into adulthood long after they have stopped serving us and decades after they have started actively harming us.
When you look back at the journey we've taken in this deep dive, it completely shatters the illusion of how we live. We have deconstructed this myth of normal. We've mapped how unhealed trauma isn't just a bad memory, but a physical architecture built inside the nervous system.
Right.
We've seen how our DNA is a keyboard being played by the environment, how our immune systems are listening to our suppressed rage, and how chronic illness is often the body's desperate, mutinous way of forcing us to finally be authentic.
But, within all of that heavy, sobering science, there really is an incredible foundation of hope.
Yeah.
Because these illnesses are rooted in dynamic processes and adaptations, they are not fixed destinies. We saw it with Mio-Care reversing her scleroderma and Caroline outliving her cancer. Just as the dynamite fuse of our telomeres can be burned down by stress, research proves they can actually be lengthened by mindfulness, resilience, and authentic community. When you recognize that disease is a process, you gain the agency to change the environment driving it. Our bodies possess an astonishing capacity to heal the very moment we stop suppressing our true selves.
Which leads you with a final provocative thought to mull over today. If our individual bodies are breaking down because they are physically manifesting the suppressed stress, the disconnection, and the forced niceness of modern life, could the skyrocketing rates of global chronic illness actually be the ultimate evolutionary alarm bell? Maybe our bodies aren't feeling us at all. Maybe they're going on strike, demanding that we completely rebuild how human beings live, connect, and relate to one another. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep listening to your gut and keep exploring your own body-mind connections.